The council chamber floated in the zero-gravity atrium like a cathedral of polished metal and softly humming energy fields, each panel reflecting the pale light of distant stars. The humans arrived late, as though deliberately treating the speed-of-light protocols like mere suggestions, and immediately began apologizing for the inconvenience in voices that carried just a hint of nervous charm. The alien council, with robes that shimmered in ways that made their bodies seem to ripple with subtle currents, barely concealed their annoyance. Somewhere above, the ceremonial drones hovered lazily, recording every gesture and whispered comment with polite indifference, though one of them twitched awkwardly when a human's shoe accidentally brushed against a photonic wire. Among the council, an elderly alien woman sat slightly apart. Her ears, long and elegantly curved, flicked with every sound, catching the faint vibrations that no younger alien paid attention to. Her eyes followed the humans like a cat observing fish, and she muttered under her breath, "For beings that claim to be primitive, they sure have a flair for controlled chaos." The younger council members ignored her, too busy debating the relative alignment of the star maps projected on floating hexagonal panels. "We must consider the elliptical trajectory of the Tenebrous cluster in conjunction with the Coulter flux," one said, waving a hand that accidentally activated a gravity pulse, sending a cup of antimatter tea spinning into orbit. It struck one of the drones, which emitted a high-pitched squeal, and the chamber erupted in nervous laughter. The humans, dressed in outfits that seemed almost absurdly tight to her eyes, did not join in the laughter. Instead, they smiled in a calculated way, each expression carefully rehearsed, as if every corner of their faces had been programmed to convey politeness, curiosity, and just enough humility to disarm suspicion. The elderly alien woman tilted her head, raising an eyebrow so high it almost touched the tip of her left ear. "Ah," she said to no one in particular, the art of deceptive charm. Humans really do take themselves far too seriously, yet somehow still manage to be endearing. As the council squabbled over the angle of a lightwave reading, the humans subtly deployed their small gadgets. A spherical drone the size of a grapefruit floated near a corner, its sensors flickering quietly, mapping the chamber's layout in 3 dimensions. Another human tapped a slim device against the floor, and a tiny hologram blinked into existence, capturing not the room itself but the patterns of attention. Who looked where, who touched what, who blinked in synchronization. The elderly alien woman noticed it immediately, a frown pulling at the corners of her mouth. "Really," she muttered, "for beings who claim to be simple, they are excessively clever about the obvious. I should have been a strategist in their place. At least I would have saved my knees." She leaned back in her chair, which responded with a mild anti-gravity pulse, nearly sending her robes twirling like a ribbon in a storm, and swore under her breath when her long ears tangled in a decorative filament that had been floating too close to the ceiling. The humans continued their polite infiltration. One tried to reach for a control panel but hesitated, as if calculating the exact amount of pressure that wouldn't trigger a security alarm. Another stepped on a stray flux cable, causing a minor cascade of lights to shimmer and blink in random colors. The chamber erupted in half-hearted applause, both nervous and entertained, but the elderly alien woman saw through the charm. She sighed audibly, loud enough for the nearest council member to look at her with mild irritation. "If diplomacy were measured in patience, I'd be the richest being in this quadrant," she said, but even she had to smile at the humans' awkward attempts to appear casual while manipulating the subtle technology. The council's younger members were oblivious. They argued over the correct interpretation of an ancient star code, waving their hands in exaggerated motions that made their robes swirl like nebulae. "If only they could see what I see," the elderly alien woman muttered. They'd faint at the thought of humans actually plotting anything more than lunch schedules. She adjusted her posture carefully, aware that her long ears made her more noticeable than she preferred, and tapped a finger against a small console embedded in her chair. It emitted a soft ping, just enough to register as attention without alarming anyone. Her gaze returned to the humans. One of the humans whispered something to another, and the elderly alien woman caught the faint movement of their lips, the subtle gesture of fingers brushing a hidden panel, the almost imperceptible shift in weight as one of them adjusted a micro-drone. A flicker of amusement passed through her features. "Honestly," she said aloud this time, drawing a sharp look from the nearest young counselor, They look like they're performing a synchronized dance to a song no one else can hear. And yet, somehow, they're actually dancing around our entire security apparatus. The humans smiled at her knowingly, as if acknowledging that yes, she had noticed. For a brief instant, a connection passed between predator and observer, though no one else could understand it. The council's debate escalated to absurdity. Someone argued that the photonic flux of the chamber required immediate recalibration, while another insisted that ignoring it could cause a ripple in the anti-gravity mesh that would be catastrophic. The elderly alien woman's chair twitched slightly as she tapped her console again, a small trick she had invented to stabilize her robes while keeping a mental tally of human movements. She chuckled, thinking, if only they knew the humans aren't even trying to break the flux, they're redesigning it while looking polite. I'd like to see them explain that to the architects of the Coulter flux. By mid-session, a minor incident occurred. A human aide tripped over a stray energy conduit, sending a tiny containment cube bouncing across the floor. One young alien leapt dramatically to catch it, only to collide with another, producing a sound not unlike two hollow metal tubes being tapped together. The chamber erupted in laughter, and even the humans allowed a brief chuckle before resuming their precise gestures, straightening a holographic display and muttering as if nothing had happened. The elderly alien woman shook her head, ears quivering in exasperation. This is going to be a long summit, she said. A long, long summit. As the session drew toward a ceremonial pause, the humans moved in ways that suggested coordination. One adjusted a light panel, another leaned slightly, just enough to obscure a sensor, a third tapped a console, causing a harmless but conspicuous flicker. The elderly alien woman noticed the pattern immediately, tracing invisible lines in her mind that connected each action to the next. Ah, she whispered, so there it is, the plan, quiet, subtle, and thoroughly ridiculous. Yet somehow, if anyone else noticed, they'd probably scream and faint simultaneously. She leaned back, allowed herself a small grin, and prepared mentally for the next move. No one else in the chamber had noticed anything. The younger counselors argued, the drones hummed, lights blinked, and the humans smiled. Only one being, with long ears flicking like antennae tuned to secrets, had seen the invisible threads that connected every human gesture. And she, the only one with both wisdom and stubborn sarcasm, knew that this summit would be remembered, not for diplomacy, not for debate, but for the subtle, cunning choreography that the humans had just begun, and for the improbable role she would play in noticing it. And she laughed quietly to herself, because if the humans thought they could execute a plan without someone noticing, they were underestimating the patience of a very old alien woman who had survived more star catastrophes than they had lived days. The chamber hummed with barely contained energy as the second session began, and the elderly alien woman could feel it, like a subtle vibration through the floor that only her ears, or perhaps her intuition, could detect. The humans, calm and deliberate, had resumed their quiet infiltration. One leaned against a console, ostensibly admiring the floating star maps, but in reality, tapping into a hidden frequency that allowed him to map the flux of the council's holographic records. Another human adjusted a gravity stabilizer with the kind of exaggerated slowness meant to seem accidental, and the elderly alien woman's ears twitched. Really, she muttered, if subtlety were an Olympic sport, humans would be disqualified for showing off. She caught the faintest flicker of motion from one of the tiny micro-drones, barely visible as it hovered like a restless insect and smirked. The council itself was a comedic mess. Young aliens argued about the aesthetic alignment of their robes in zero gravity, as if the perfect swirl of fabric could somehow influence the outcome of a galactic summit. One accidentally activated a pulse field that sent a stack of data cubes spinning across the chamber, which another tried to catch, only to collide spectacularly with a decorative floating column. The cubes ricocheted, bouncing off walls and ceilings, until a startled human caught one midair with a casual hand movement that was far too smooth to be accidental. The elderly alien woman raised an eyebrow and whispered, "Yes, let's all pretend that was sheer luck. I've seen nebulae with less elegance than that catch." The humans moved with synchronized precision, each minor action calibrated to affect the chamber without drawing undue attention. A small spherical device floated between them, projecting subtle interference patterns into the council's data streams. Another human subtly activated a sensor that translated alien vocal harmonics into a readable code in real time. The elderly alien woman leaned forward, murmuring to herself, "And here I thought they were here to admire our decor. Clearly, they're redecorating the very fabric of our deliberations." She tapped a finger against her chair console, initiating a counterscan to map the human's devices. Meanwhile, a junior counselor, oblivious to everything except impressing a colleague with his knowledge of binary star cycles, waved his arms dramatically, accidentally triggering a low-energy laser sweep that painted the walls in streaks of harmless light. The humans ducked in exaggerated slow motion, their movements comically graceful, prompting the elderly alien woman to chuckle. "You could teach acrobatics with that," she said, her long ears flicking in amusement. One human, not missing a beat, returned a mock bow before resuming the placement of a microarchive on a console. The council's debates grew increasingly absurd. Someone argued about the moral implications of manipulating antimatter flow for ceremonial purposes, while another insisted that ignoring it might destabilize a star grid light years away. The humans, unflustered, continued their quiet adjustments, occasionally exchanging glances that were almost conspiratorial. The elderly alien woman leaned back and shook her head. "If only they understood," she murmured. "The humans are like toddlers with quantum toys, except somehow they understand the rules I've been studying for centuries." Her chair twitched in response, an anti-gravity pulse keeping her robes in place, though one ear brushed against a floating data ribbon, sending it spiraling comically around her head. At one point, a human accidentally triggered a minor holographic disturbance while adjusting a panel. Instead of panicking, the humans immediately incorporated it into their plan, subtly masking it as an aesthetic feature. The chamber erupted in laughter as some aliens assumed the flickering hologram was a ceremonial display. The elderly alien woman's lips twitched in a sardonic smile. "Of course," she muttered, turning accidents into artistry. "Typical human flair." She leaned closer to her console and began plotting her own response, creating a web of countermeasures that were both effective and absurdly theatrical, because if she was going to stop them, she would do so with panache. As the humans executed their next series of maneuvers, the elderly alien woman noticed the pattern crystallizing. Every minor distraction, the spinning cubes, the flickering holograms, the accidental gravity pulses, was part of a sequence designed to weaken the Council's attention span just enough to exploit system vulnerabilities. She tapped a small holographic interface embedded in her chair, creating a mirrored sequence of harmless disruptions that both tracked the humans' actions and subtly corrected the errors before they could cause serious damage. "If this were a play," she said, whispering to herself, "I'd be the lead, the director, and the understudy all at once." The younger council members continued their oblivious chaos. One argued so passionately about star pattern alignment that he knocked over an entire shelf of floating research cubes, which spun around the chamber like a miniature asteroid belt. A human, with the kind of effortless dexterity that seemed almost impossible, guided one cube back into place with a single hand motion while making it look like it had gently floated there on its own. The elderly alien woman laughed quietly, shaking her head. "They're like painters if painters painted in midair with explosives." The human's plan continued to unfold with quiet elegance. Each device, each adjustment, was part of a choreography designed to probe weaknesses and test reactions. The elderly alien woman, despite her age, matched their pace. She initiated holographic decoys, minor interference pulses, and subtle counter-surveys, each move designed to observe without alarming the council. Her ears flicked constantly, reading vibrations, whispers, and shifts in microgravity that no one else noticed. Then came the minor disaster disguised as humor. A human, attempting to adjust a light reflector, tripped on a flux cable and sent a small antimatter cube ricocheting across the room. Young aliens dove dramatically, smacking into each other and producing sparks that were entirely harmless but spectacular. The elderly alien woman didn't flinch. Instead, she guided the cube's trajectory with a faint hand gesture, intercepting it midair and sending it spinning perfectly into its original slot, all while muttering, "Really, do you think I wasn't expecting that? I've survived more explosions than you've had breakfasts." She caught a glance from one human, who raised an eyebrow in subtle acknowledgement. By the end of the session, the humans had quietly completed several stages of their plan, leaving the council both oblivious and mildly entertained by the harmless chaos. The elderly alien woman observed the aftermath, her long ears twitching with satisfaction. She had seen the pattern, anticipated the consequences, and managed to guide the chaos in a way that would prevent disaster, at least for now. Ah, she whispered to herself, humans, annoying, clever, and somehow endearing. And just as I suspected, no one else noticed a thing. The chamber settled into a tense but comical quiet. The younger counselors were busy correcting robes and stacking floating data cubes, while the humans smiled politely, pretending to admire the decor. The elderly alien woman leaned back, ears flicking lazily, and allowed herself a small, sardonic grin. She had anticipated the humans' moves, countered them with wit and minor chaos of her own, and yet she knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there beyond the chamber, the rest of the humans' plan awaited. She let out a small, dry laugh. I'll need more coffee for this next round, or at least a stronger anti-gravity chair. The chamber vibrated with barely contained energy, like a stretched string ready to snap, though only the elderly alien woman seemed to notice. The humans, calm and deliberate, moved through the floating panels and holographic maps with the air of performers executing a meticulously rehearsed routine. One adjusted a console with exaggerated care, another tapped a hovering drone so lightly it seemed a breeze had moved it, and a third, with a wry glance, activated a subtle pulse that interfered with the council's energy fields in a way that was just noticeable enough to provoke curiosity, but not alarm. The younger counselors were oblivious, debating the orientation of a holographic star map as though it might collapse an entire system if not aligned properly, while their robes floated in gravity-defying spirals that looked like a mid-air fashion show gone wrong. The elderly alien woman leaned back in her chair, her long ears twitching, and whispered, "If chaos had a mascot, it would be you lot." The humans' plan began to unfold in earnest. The minor disturbances of the previous sessions were now coordinated sequences, invisible to all but the most observant eye. Light panels flickered in patterns that subtly masked their manipulations of the chamber's systems. Small spherical drones hovered in arcs that corrected themselves whenever an alien moved unpredictably, creating a perfect dance of interference and observation. A human, with a calmness that bordered on theatrical, adjusted a console in a way that scrambled data streams just enough to confuse the younger council members into arguing over imaginary discrepancies. The elderly alien woman's lips twitched in amusement. All this subtlety and still they think it's just a polite disagreement. Adorable. A sudden surge of chaos erupted when a junior counselor, flailing dramatically while explaining the moral implications of a quantum flux anomaly, accidentally triggered a minor energy cascade. Cubes of floating data ricocheted across the chamber, and a holographic map of the tenebrous cluster wavered like a heat mirage. The humans reacted with exaggerated grace, guiding the cubes and panels with minimal effort while making it appear entirely unplanned. The elderly alien woman's ears twitched involuntarily in admiration. "Elegance disguised as accident," she muttered. "I could teach a master class in that." She tapped her console, sending subtle countermeasures into the chamber. Holographic decoys, microinterference pulses, and minor anti-gravity adjustments that neutralized any real damage while maintaining the illusion of chaos. The council continued to bicker over negligible errors, oblivious to the humans' orchestration. One argued about the ethical use of antimatter for ceremonial illumination, another about the correct calibration of stargrid energy flows. Their robes tangled and spun, and a minor collision of bodies sent a small laser projector spinning harmlessly into orbit. The humans subtly intercepted it, guiding it back into place with a hand movement so precise it seemed almost magical. The elderly alien woman chuckled quietly. "They look like toddlers juggling suns," she said, "except they're winning." She adjusted her chair slightly, ears brushing a floating holographic filament, and prepared for the final sequence. The humans' next move was audacious. A subtle shift in the chamber's energy alignment would temporarily disable several security protocols, allowing them to access and observe restricted data streams. The younger counselors, preoccupied with correcting floating cubes and arguing about robe alignment, were entirely unaware. The elderly alien woman, however, had anticipated the maneuver. She activated a network of minor holographic disruptions that subtly masked the humans' activity while creating a pattern the humans did not anticipate, a visual echo of their own movements. They paused, recognizing it, but could not immediately identify its source. The woman's eyes twinkled with dry amusement. "Caught you," she whispered under her breath, and her ears flicked in satisfaction. As the humans attempted to recover, a minor mishap occurred. One misjudged the trajectory of a data cube, sending it spinning toward a decorative energy column. The elderly alien woman intervened effortlessly, catching it midair with a hand gesture so subtle that it looked like coincidence. "Really," she said aloud, "I've survived supernovae, wormhole collapses, and rogue asteroids, and now I'm babysitting humans in formal wear." A human glanced at her, half smiling, acknowledging the intervention without words. The council was now fully immersed in unintentional comedy. Laser projectors buzzed, holograms wavered, and robes twisted in midair, but the elderly alien woman maintained a calm center amidst the storm. She had guided every micro-disruption, anticipated every human adjustment, and subtly corrected any trajectory that could cause real damage. For the first time in decades, she felt the thrill of complete control, not through dominance, but through observation, wisdom, and patience. She realized that age, experience, and a touch of sarcasm were the truest forms of power in this chamber. Finally, the humans retreated, bowing politely and leaving behind only faint traces of their activity. The younger counselors blinked, noticing minor discrepancies in the data cubes and holograms but attributing them to random chance or gravity anomalies. The chamber settled into calm, the floating panels glowing softly, the drones hovering like obedient sentinels. The elderly alien woman exhaled, her long ears flicking lazily. "And that," she said quietly, "is why no one listens to experience until disaster is at the door." The council members, gradually noticing that nothing catastrophic had occurred, turned their attention to more mundane matters. The elderly alien woman leaned back, allowing herself a small, satisfied smile. Her ears twitched once more, capturing faint vibrations in the chamber that no one else noticed. She had observed